Sir, what can you say about the claim that Islam is naturally incompatible with democracies?
It's not compatible.
Yes.
Well, in the first place, Islam is not there are points of complementarities between Islam and democracy. There are also points of differences. In the first place, Islam is not a system of government. It is more than a system of government. The system of government is just one element of Islam. But Islam has many manifestations in terms of government. So you cannot just limit to just one historical period, say during the Ottoman Empire, the Abbasid Empire. Islam as principle espouses certain what you call this mode or ways of we would say appreciating democracies or working democracies with democracies. I think the problem of like identifying the relation between Islam and democracy is a quite new phenomenon, due perhaps to the impression that Muslim societies are quite traditional. They're not open to some Western influences, including the workings of the operation of democracy. So they would look at it as the sign of this difference between Islam and democracy. And indeed, you cannot compare some sort of an orange with a guava, for instance. You know. But Islam is more than a democracy. It is a system of life. It is a way of life. All system can have its place under Islam. But this phenomenon of relating the two is basically, I think, due to that. The impression that Muslim is a traditional society. It's not open to democracy, etc., etc. But why are you so animated with democracy if at some point democracy can be a vice, you know, an what you call this practice or a overwhelming applications or appropriations of democracy can in fact be negative. I mean, look at the Philippines, for instance, a country that supposedly to be, democratic, but I think this system is quite problematic. In other words, you should not be so fixated with relating, particular phenomenon with another culture in an attempt to look at their culture from the perspective of a particular phenomenon, say like democracy. Democracy can be made to temper with varying cultures. There is no monolithic definition of democracy. There cannot be a monolithic definition of democracy. You might have some ways of locating or positioning women in society, but we have to respect some cultures, for instance, in their ways of appropriating some signs or standards of democracy. So that in a sense, you don't also become so so what you call this, so engrossed, you know, of looking at certain society from a particular framework. You know, just because your training teaches you that this is democracy according to Western practice.
Sir, you mentioned that globalization has had a great impact on Middle Eastern monarchies in general. And it's shown also, like in the case of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, they're starting to have elections regarding their politicians.
So open up. Sure.
Yes, sir. What would you say the prospects for the creation of a constitutional monarchy, especially in the case of Saudi Arabia, are, considering that right now they're more of a Sharia-based government, an absolute monarchy?
Well, on one hand, it doesn't mean that if you have a Sharia-based, it won't be compatible with some kind of a constitutional state or, as you said, monarchy. There can always be room for some complementation between Sharia-based and a constitution-based. But I allude earlier to the concept of resilience, the resilience of these monarchies amidst globalization. The fact that on one hand they continuously exist, and at the same time they're innovating, you know, some approaches in their countries. Like for instance, I think it was during the time of King Fahd where he instituted the Majlis, the council. He started, I think the number was quite small in the early 90s, but it grew from around 60 to 90, then 120, and now 160 members of the council. Although these are mostly appointed. Shows, I think, of the openness, of the readiness of monarchies to institute reforms that are in consonance with certain, as you may say, some democratic practices. I would look at it as the readiness to innovate methods in terms of letting people have their own representatives. Although you cannot stretch further this if you mean like the notions of representative democracy in other Western countries. That is the nuances. That is the beauty, I think, of we are able to respect their culture. There are no like uniform standards of representative democracy. So it has some kind of gray areas in between. So some by election, direct election, some by appointment, some by delegation, etc., etc. But these are good signs that indeed the Saudi government has stood to the demand of the times. It has to institute some reform.